Let's check in with some of these hotspots. eNCA's Lindokuhle Xulu is in Mamelodi and he joins us now live. Lindo, we had spoken to you a little earlier on, and there seemed to be some chaos and pandemonium with community members not necessarily wanting to evacuate the area because they wanted to find a way to get to their personal belongings. But seeing behind you, it looks like the water level is quite high and rains are persisting. What can you tell us?
Well, that's right, Heidi. We are just at another point here in Mamelodi, just to give you a different picture, really, of the devastation that has been caused here in this particular community. I should mention that this is the same community that had the Mamelodi flood victims in 2019, and this is happening again while residents are still here. I'll just give you a shot with my colleague Teddy Munyembane just for you to see what is happening. But you are right, earlier on we did see some tensions rising, with some residents saying that they do not want to leave this area. They do not want to be taken to safe areas because they want to salvage some of their belongings here as soon as the water subsides. Now, what also we've been told by Emergency Management Services in Tshwane is that there was also an issue around some of the residents that were seen high up in their structures who did not want to be rescued. In fact, some of them, we understand, were even pelting some of the rescue helicopters trying to get to them, saying that they do not want to leave here. So I guess this time around it's just a matter of trying to find whatever they can find in terms of some of their structures here. But many of the structures we see are still intact, with some just swept away here. But this is a replay of a situation that had played out in 2019, and some of the residents are essentially calling to be relocated to another area. They're saying that government had promised them in 2019 that they would be relocated, but that has since not happened, and this is why we're seeing such a situation. And we're just giving you a holistic picture in terms of some of the devastation. But one of the things really that is telling of how dire this situation is the fact that what you are looking at is houses that are literally built near a river stream, which causes a problem. Of course, there has been some speaking out against residents building here, but of course these residents have told us that unfortunately they have nowhere to go except to wait for government to relocate them. But they're saying that such promises have yielded no results, with residents not being able to be relocated here. So they're saying that they'll continue waiting here. Some of them are saying probably they'll still rebuild here, but at the end of the day, this remains a very much a big concern in terms of safety, especially for those emergency workers that will be responding to such things, and are being met with some resistance from some who are saying they want to protect their belongings.
Exactly. And you know, Lindo, I want us to go back to a very important point that you touched on, because if I'm not mistaken, it was in late 2019, or if it was not, beginning of 2019, where you had this community up in arms, received no assistance. They were then taken to a community hall. If I'm not mistaken, it was a church, where they were kept there for a very long time. Promises were made by the Premier of Gauteng, David Makhura, that there would be measures put in place to assist this community. And years later, they are still in the same position. They don't have adequate housing, and they are building on in an area where it's extremely dangerous, because the minute it rains, there's flooding.
That's right, Heidi. In fact, we followed that story quite extensively in 2019, just following up on those Mamelodi flood victims that were displaced and then put in the Mamelodi Baptist Church. But there were promises that were made, of course, to relocate them. I can confirm, because I've visited some of the areas in which they were relocated to. About 38 of them were relocated to a certain area in around around Tshwane. But one thing that is eminent, and one thing that someone raised just off camera to me, some of the residents, they were saying that, you know, while people are actually being relocated, like those flood victims were relocated, that these areas are not protected against further illegal invasions. And so that is the reason why you are seeing a lot of people coming here. So there is a call to say that while people might still be relocated, while they might get the help that they need in terms of moving to safer areas, these areas must then be protected protected and guarded against invasion, so that as to keep this situation permanently solved. Because one of the things we were told is that some people, yes, they were relocated, but unfortunately people just keep on coming back to these areas. Yes, some out of desperation, but some just taking advantage of the fact that someday they will be relocated because they've seen it happen before. So the situation just keeps on replaying itself. And you're right in saying that these questions should be put to government to say that what is it that is happening, while they're saying they're making efforts to relocate, making efforts to guard against land invasions, but what is it that will happen that will bring about a permanent solution? So those are some of the questions that really still need to be answered. But in the meantime, this situation remains, Heidi, as I move out of shot and leave it to you, this dire situation of some residents that will find themselves each and every time when there are heavy rains in this situation. And at this moment, Tshwane has confirmed that there is no loss of life, but I can tell you that looking at this, if rains continue to persist, that might just change.
Exactly, Lindo, and just looking at these visuals and hearing from some of the community members you've interviewed, with some of them saying we're not willing to actually leave our houses and leave the spaces that we are in of fear of losing our personal belongings. We've heard from emergency services throughout the show that they are at hotspots areas and they are trying to monitor the situation. But I don't see any emergency services where you are here. Maybe they don't classify that as a hotspot, but this looks quite dangerous to me and a big risk should rains persist.
Yes, there are in fact, Heidi, emergency services around the area. In fact, they are on the other side. We just moved this side to give you this holistic picture of what is happening. But yes, residents did say that they do not want to leave this area. In fact, some of them even suggested that instead of being pushed to community halls and churches, what they want is a tent that will be erected here so that when the water subsides, they are able to go and get their belongings. I think the priority for many of the residents is to ensure that their belongings do not get stolen in the process of them trying to find a shelter here. So that is the impasse that the emergency services are battling with at the moment. But it seems that this particular area will not be vacated anytime soon, because while we are standing here, we're already seeing some people rebuilding, despite the fact that more rains are forecasted to continue. But we're already seeing people salvaging what they can and rebuilding their structures. And hence I said that this is a matter that really needs the attention of authorities and a very decisive approach in terms of what needs to happen to such communities. I mean, there are many communities around this area that we've visited that are essentially submerged in water, worse than what we are seeing here. And this is all because all of them are saying they have nowhere else to go. They are desperate to find their own places, and they cannot afford to pay rents at certain areas. But at the end of the day, these areas that they put themselves in put them at risk. And that is why I'm saying that we really need to find a different approach in terms of dealing with such things and guarding against further invasions that will then bring us back into this picture. 2019 we were here, today we are here, and I foresee that in the near future, if nothing happens, we will still be here speaking about the same thing, speaking about the same danger to life of people that are saying they're desperate for a place to call home.
It's a complete indictment on government. This is not a new problem. It's not a problem that's going to go away. It's a problem that is going to persist. And Lindo, I just want us to stay with these visuals because I want to ask you one last question. Seeing the vulnerability of these people, I mean, they are obviously so desperate that they would even go as far as building their homes and where they call home literally on a river, where as soon as it starts raining, the water line increases and it causes a huge risk. From your understanding, I know you've been to a few areas and hotspot areas. Do you know if anybody has been evacuated or told to move immediately, perhaps to a community hall, a church or a school, because of the risk of there being further flooding and loss of life in any particular area?
The general message towards residents at this stage, particularly those that are living near riverbanks such as the one you are seeing on your screens, is that they must in fact evacuate. Like I said, there is more rain that is still forecasted, but one of the things that we've been seeing, of course, is the resistance of residents to leave these particular areas, particularly because they're saying that they have belongings that they need to protect. But I can tell you from what we've heard from the emergency services in Tshwane is that there are provisions arrangements that have been made. There are community halls that have been made available so that people can actually go and find safe shelter in terms of these heavy rains that are forecasted and more expected, in fact, to have some downpours during this particular weekend. But the issue that the city of Tshwane has expressed is that residents of these areas do not want to live here, and to see someone rebuilding right now while more rains are expected, while the river is still this high, is telling of the fact that there will be some resistance in terms of some of the residents and the plea for them to move to a safer place. Some of them, I can tell you, are preparing to sleep here tonight despite what had happened to them. But the issue here, Heidi, is the matter that some of the residents that have been tried to they were trying to rescue, as far as emergency services is concerned, have resisted their rescue. They want to remain here, they want to stay here, and they feel that if they move away from here, they will lose more than they've already lost when it comes to these flash floods. So those are some of the tricky situations that emergency services are dealing with. But at the end of the day, Heidi, it's a matter of safety that people have been encouraged to move to these shelters. Unfortunately, not everyone is willing to undertake this particular process of getting into a place of safety.